Welcome back to Student Hub Live. This session is about learning and caring for others, which is great because I've got a dreadful cold today. And we've been talking a lot about learning here today. But this session is specifically aimed at students who may not know that there are 5,000 students studying with the Open University who have some sort of caring responsibility. So they might be caring for a member of their family or a friend with a long-term illness or disability. And I've invited some colleagues here, Chris and Mary, from the School of Health, Wellbeing and Social Care, because they've been researching some of these experiences of these students and also specifically the strategies that they use to manage their studies. And while this might apply to students who are in that particular category, you've got really good strategies for any student as well that I'm hoping you'll share with us today. So we've got some questions for you. Are you currently a carer, and have you notified the OU that you're a carer? They're very simple yes or no questions, but you can also put your chat in the chat box to HJ and Joe if there's anything that you'd like to talk about. Just remember that people at home can see that chat, so don't disclose anything that you're not comfortable sharing in that particular domain. So Mary, can you tell us a little bit about carers as a group of people?
Well, we know that there's far more carers than who admit or will recognise that they are caring, because for many of us it's part of our natural role. Yeah. You know, if your elderly parent gets ill, you think, right, I'm going to look after them. Yeah. There's only a certain point when people actually realise they're a carer as such. But the research shows that carers across the board are in many ways disadvantaged by caring. There's many benefits. People do it because they love the person they're caring for and they feel it's satisfying, but it's very emotionally draining and can be physically very draining. It impacts on people's social life because they don't have time to keep up with their friends, and it can impact on people financially as well. And it impacts, last but not least, on education as well, particularly.
So these caring responsibilities are something that have quite an impact, but what you're saying is that in terms of a categorical sense, some people may be considered to be carers and some people may be caring but without that sort of category associated with them because it's a relative, for example, as you say.
Yes, but when you say they may be considered, it's their consideration as such, because it's a question of identifying
yourself.
Yes, yeah.
So let's see, when we ask people at home, are you currently a carer, what you've said, who are watching right now. So at the moment, 57% say no, they're not, but 43% consider themselves to be a carer. Could that include parents?
No. Officially, well, yes, you can be a parent, but official definitions of carers see that you're caring for somebody who's got over and above normal needs. So you could be a parent carer if your child has a long-term illness. So that's the difference. It's not ordinary parenting. But that's, again, one of the problems of being a carer is the boundaries are quite blurred.
I bet. And I guess that makes it quite difficult to research, doesn't it?
Well, it's a factor, but there's a lot of research, a lot of good research about carers, but it's getting at those what we call hidden carers, the people who don't self-identify is the key thing, because there is a lot of help you can get, and that's what we like to reinforce with students. We need to know, and then we can help.
Well, let's see what people said when we asked, have you notified the OU that you're a carer? So 86% say no. So remember that we had just under half who were identifying as a carer, but a lot of people don't.
Yes.
What might explain that?
A lot of people see it as part of their responsibilities. Right. That's what you do. And a lot of people, what the research project we've recently done showed on student carers, is that people think they don't want to be known as a carer. That it's not an identity that they want given to them. And also some students don't identify as a carer because they're not aware that they can have extra help, but in fact they can.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So before we talk about some of the extra help, you've been talking about this project. Chris, could you just sort of briefly outline what it is that you and the school have done?
So as Mary describes, we know a lot about carers as a group, but actually we know very little about student carers.
Across the board in education.
So there's very little research in this area, and so we thought it would be worth looking into to try to understand the experiences of student carers, but also the way in which they managed their studies. So how were they successful as student carers? So we set out to interview carry out 20 in-depth interviews with students. 16 of those students were women, 4 were men. And those carers had a variety of responsibilities. Some of them had been caring for up to 20 years. So this needed to be quite sensitive research. We're very interested in the differences between carers, the different circumstances they were in, the kind of who they were caring for, and the kind of demands they had upon them, but also the differences between them in terms of their study. So, and their career plans, the program they were on, where they saw themselves going, and also how they managed their study over time.
Yeah. So what were some of the main things that you learned? You've mentioned a few things here about, I guess, sort of time and predictability of things. What did you learn helped them to be successful?
Well, the thing about it that was interesting is that caring always comes first, doesn't it?
Yes. And carers had developed strategies for coping with the fact that their caring role comes first. They were very good at organising their study. They were good at accepting and going with the flow. And we found that they had numerous ways of managing their time. So for example, carving out blocks of time. And using their support systems as well. We found that a lot of them had really good networks outside of the OU, say to have the kids while they studied, or get someone in to care for the person they're caring for. And they were very good at actually setting boundaries. This is what I've got to do, and I'm going to do it.
And part of those boundaries, there's some real surprises, weren't there? That when study threw them a curveball and that they couldn't meet their deadlines, or they're struggling to meet their deadlines, we would have thought, so tell us about your negotiation of extensions. Many carers actually said the opposite, didn't they? They said, we won't ask for extensions. We don't want to fall behind. We need to keep with the study schedule.
We also found that, and we alluded to this earlier, that many students didn't tell their tutor. But those who had told their tutor said they found it very beneficial because the tutor understood if they needed extensions when they wanted to ask for them, and could offer individual support if necessary, and was aware of the pressures that they were under, and could put them in contact with other sources of support in the Open University.
You're speaking a lot about people managing this almost like, the benefits associated with study, and that's something that I think is often for students associated with me time or self-development. And you mentioned caring comes first, but there are clearly some benefits of studying, and it's interesting how these students were factoring those in so that they were able to both, I guess, prioritise something lower, like their own study, than caring, but equally being able to negotiate, as you're saying, those demands. How did they do that?
Well, many said that they really enjoyed the study, and it gave them confidence. Some said it made them a better carer. That was partly because we interviewed students who were doing health, welfare and
so
courses.
Something almost aligned with what they were doing, so something developmental that might, would to some extent what they were studying give them more knowledge that may help them be a better carer, is that?
And then you want to advocate for and give them understanding. And then many of them talked about how it was helping them towards a future career or to do a job that was more aligned with caring than the job they got at the moment. Because let's not forget, some of these people were working, studying and caring. It was phenomenal what they were doing.
And their families to also attend to as well. So there's a really strong sense of having a very clear focus on what's important and what's not. So Mary talked about they had, some of them had quite well developed networks. But what that meant is they could see the Open University offered online communities, and they would say, well, actually, that's not my priority right now. I'm going to focus on my networks and that support. So a very clear sense of what's in and what's out.
And it was helpful for us as well because there's quite a few moves at the moment, some modules, to have online peer support groups for carers. But the carers we spoke to didn't necessarily find the actual belonging to a group helped that much because it's more time out. What they really wanted was individual support from the tutor. So that was one of our recommendations from our research, that there's more options for students who are carers to have individual support from the tutor.
Yeah. So that point is really important, actually, because while it's lovely sitting here and talking with everyone at home about a variety of stuff, for some people they might not have that luxury of time, or it might not be a priority. And it seems like what you're saying, Chris, is that some students feel actually community doesn't matter to me to the same extent it might matter to other students.
Yes.
I need this, and it's almost a more functional approach to getting your needs met and identifying what those are and then seeing how you can get them.
Well, that community, or the university community, doesn't matter to them, but my community, my local community, my neighbourhood community, that's what sustains me. And so the important message for carers is to think about what sustains you, what's going to get you through this. It is challenging to do this kind of study with these responsibilities.
And to it's your time, I'd say to these students, do what works for you. The support's there. It doesn't mean that support is right for you. Choose what works for you. And if you're finding your systems of support at home give you that time, then get the OU system to work around that. And if you want more support from the Open University, it's there, or talk to your tutor about it.
Brilliant. Let's take a quick trip to HJ and Joe and see how everyone is at home.
We're okay. We're talking about cake. Sorry. But we were chatting about caring responsibilities, really, and sometimes also you don't really know that something needs to be brought up or discussed. Like you were saying, some people don't talk about their caring responsibilities. They don't know that it's something that should be mentioned. And just this morning, I've chatted to a few students who didn't realise that something we would find quite big and could affect their studies, they hadn't mentioned. So we had caring responsibilities and a disability, and we need to know about that so we can support you. And you
can now on Student Home, you can register that you're a carer. And there's a support team at Nottingham now who every student that registers as a carer, they will note and they'll offer support. They'll phone up every so often to say how's things going.
Teams do that.
So it's worth it to identify.
So always declare so that we can reach out and check in with you and make sure everything's okay.
And also, I guess those responsibilities might fluctuate. Sometimes there might be higher demands on time than others.
Right, because illnesses vary, and sometimes you might stop caring. So it's not a constant. And people go in and out of caring across the life course.
And you mentioned support that's available. Can you tell us more about what support is available?
Right. Well, there's various support available within modules. So as long as there's extensions, and more flex. What else was there? The support with the tutor, individual option. But the Open University now has what's called student packs, and they're on Student Home. They're called the Carers Packs. So if we could look at what's in these packs, this is actually the Welsh one, but we do have one for each nation. But it's about a 6-page pack. If we go to the next page, it gives you an outline of the contents, which shows you all the sorts of things it can give you help with. So, for example, helping you to manage your time, where to go to for help, financial resources, going to your tutor. So I'd really recommend having a look at this pack to see what all the support is that you can get.
How do people get hold of that pack?
It's on Student Home.
Right, so anyone can access it. You can just go and find out what's... And I guess some very valuable tips for anybody. I mean, time management's always such an issue anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The final thing I wanted to talk about was you mentioned that sometimes students who are caring, and I appreciate you were talking to students who were doing health and social care, were very mindful of the sort of knowledge that they were getting and that might help them be better carers. Often students don't really recognise the skills they're building up in terms of study skills, the time management, the juggling and balancing skills, articulating a coherent argument. All of those skills are important. Did any of that emerge through your research, that it wasn't just what you were studying, but it was that you were studying that enabled people to become better people?
Well, quite a few of them talked about the way in which their vision of the future changed, for example. So they did talk about the way in which studying these courses changed the way they saw how they saw themselves in terms of where they were going, for example. Weren't they?
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the bigger ones, wasn't it?
And it boosted their self-esteem. That was a big thing, and increased confidence as well. Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're getting at is transferable skills. I can't remember them being mentioned specifically, but it was feeling empowered that I think was the key message that came across. Yeah.
And what would your advice be then for students maybe who are not carers, that they could learn from this particular cohort of students that they were successful at?
Well, one of the things that struck me is a point that Mary made earlier about, she said, always talk to the tutor. And there, if you get stuck, you may get extensions. But there's something in there that was really intriguing, that many of the carers, as I mentioned earlier, said, well, if I get an extension, I still have to do it. And now I've got 2 assignments to do in a period of time instead of just one. I'm going to fall behind. That doesn't mean don't talk to your tutor. There are alternatives to getting extensions from your tutors. You could sit down and discuss with your tutor about how to prioritise your study, about a strategic approach to your study. You could discuss time management, so the work doesn't get on top of you. Unfortunately, fortunately, it is the case with study that you do need to just keep going, keep at it, you know.
And that's what these carers showed. They showed they were very good at keeping going. Yes, and I think for any student, those skills are invaluable. Just to be able to keep going when the going gets tough.
Absolutely. You may think that if you've got an assignment to write, that you need a whole day to write your assignment. I can't possibly, this day's gone, I can't possibly write this assignment. But for these carers, these people who had lost half a day having to attend to something, and they would just go with the flow, I'll write a little bit this afternoon, I'll write a little bit tomorrow afternoon, to keep chipping away at things.
Yeah, okay. So it seems to me that a lot of that is about, I guess, managing their own expectations and perhaps other people's expectations about what's possible to do.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. And Aisha, you put the link to the carers pack in the chat.
Yes, so I've had a look at it myself. There's lots of great resources, and a lot of people have said in the chat as well, they've realised that maybe they should let their tutor know sooner on, or maybe they didn't even consider letting their tutor know about what's going on in their lives, but that's what the tutors are there for. They're so great and supportive. Katie said earlier she let her tutor know about her conditions, and she got so much support to get through her module. And she said, without letting my tutor know, I don't think I would have been able to make it through. But just with that little extra support and the tutor accounting for what help she needed, she got through it. So very positive.
I think that's a really good point, because even when you start a module, even if your caring situation is manageable, that doesn't mean it's going to be manageable all the time. So if your tutor knows, your tutor's clocked that, and then you don't have to explain it in a crisis. The tutor knows that you're caring and can then offer the appropriate support.
Yeah. Oh, sounds like a really interesting project. Are you doing any more work on it?
Well, we're about to start phase 2, aren't we? So this will expand across the university, taking in other sorts of groups. So we're currently exploring resources to do that work, but we'll be able to hopefully start towards the end of this year, I should think.
Well, we want to look at implementing some of the recommendations that came out of our first study, but we want to get those more grounded in university experience first before we do that. So the intention was always to carry out two studies. We're hoping to take it into build it into university policy, things like not having to produce evidence for when you need an extension, which would be ideal for carers, because if you're caring, you need an extension. You don't have to go around producing evidence. We understand that.
Brilliant. Sounds really practical and very, very interesting. Thank you both so much for coming and sharing. That's been wonderful. Okay, we're going to have our fabulous Wheel of Ologies quiz next, which is always one of my highlights of Freshers Week. This is a multi-choice quiz where you at home, led by HJ, can think of your own team name. You've now got your study buddy, which I've heard is called Lord Donkey McDonkeyface. So that can be your, your what's it called? Maths mascot, isn't it, HJ? And you can play against our teams in the studio. We're going to race upstairs, but before we do that, we've got a video to show you about a time I went over to speak to some of Joe's colleagues at the student support team over the road, so you can see their officers and learn a little bit about what they do. Then we've got our quiz, and then we're going to have a couple of hours off, and we're going to be back at 5 o'clock for this evening's programme, which is going to be really exciting and involve lots and lots and lots of real cake with no vegetables in it. So we'll see you for our quiz in just a few minutes. Bye for now.